This is Democracy is Collapsing. This 1971 playbook started it all. I have not watched this. I see he is a Bears fan, so I'm going to question his decision-making ability. But we're going to give him a chance.
Over 50 years old and is currently dismantling our democracy. You can draw a straight line from it to our emerging tech oligarchy.
Oh, I don't think we're witnessing the start of an oligarchy. I think we are
You see what I'm saying?
Here.
You see what AOC is doing right here? Like, that's... Can you see fucking Chuck Schumer doing this? No, he doesn't know how to do this. AOC knows what she's doing.
And here's the scary thing. Even if we manage to stop Doge or the terrorizing of migrants, this memo and its half-century of influence, well, it isn't going anywhere. And if anyone is going to have any hope of saving our democracy, politicians and activists need to combat.
I'm going to guess it's the Powell memo. It was 71. I think that might be too late. Pretty sure, though. Powell memo.
Its legacy.
Welcome to the new American oligarchy.
So it's 1971, and corporate lawyer Lewis Powell is cracking open my favorite toilet read, Fortune magazine, when he sees his worst enemy staring back at him.
You know his name. It's Ralph Nader. He's father of this country's consumer movement. In almost 30 years of advocacy, he has created a national consciousness about product safety in almost all areas of our lives, from the cars we drive to where we work.
As a board member of Philip Morris, Powell's mission was convincing the public that cigarettes weren't really that bad for you. The celebrity of this car safety crusader was horrifying to Powell, so he called up his neighbor to complain about Nader's threat to the great American tradition of corporate crime. And maybe just to shut him up, that neighbor, who happened to run the Chamber of Commerce, commissioned Powell to write a confidential memorandum for its members. It would become a 6,400-word screed about the plight of the forgotten man. The forgotten man here is corporate America, which in Powell's view had as little influence in government of any group in the country. Titled Attack on American Free Enterprise System, his memo began, no thought...
And this is still, to this day, an opinion that many people have in the upper middle class, is that they need more authority. I've said this before. I don't think that Elon Musk wants more money. I think that Elon Musk wants more power. Many of these people aren't complaining about how much money they have. They're complaining that they don't get the proper amount of authority that they believe they should have. I think this is one of the things that people are very much getting wrong about what Elon Musk is doing right now. Almost everybody is concentrating on the money. It's not money. Money is resources. Resources are power. They want more voice, they want more resources, and they want more control.
Thoughtful person can question that the American economic system is under broad attack. Those attacks were coming from leftist radicals who he once compared to Adolf
These are the
Hitler.
left that we have to beat. This is the left we have to beat.
Powell reflected that America's devoted businessmen hadn't been prepared for the left's guerrilla warfare, as they'd been too busy doing their jobs and generally being good citizens. He writes, "The time has come for the wisdom, ingenuity, and resources of American businesses to be marshaled against those who would destroy it." In short, he wanted a government run for business by business. What we in the industry like to call an oligarchy. Powell boldly called for corporate America to seize power and use it aggressively, without embarrassment and without the reluctance which has been so characteristic of American business. And the American business world was ready to listen. Powell's memo circulated widely, essentially going pre-internet viral, according to the investigative journalist behind the podcast The Master Plan. Powell gained immediate disciples. Joseph Coors of Really Cold Beer fame read the memo and launched the massively influential Heritage Foundation, whose pro-business policy recommendations would culminate.
Look at all this. It's so crazy how you can trace this shit all back. It's insane. Like, just think about, like, add together what you have here, what he's talking about with the Powell memo, techno-oligarchy. You talk about the 70s, you talk about Steve Jobs and the Silicon Valley, the people who became tech oligarchs that were mixing with the 70s hippies that were, anti-big government, anti-vaccine, and created this ideology. So on one side, you have all the tech oligarchs that are being formed during this time. And on the other side, you have the Heritage Foundation types that are also being formed right now. And then in the 50s, you have the Red Scare, you have McCarthyism, and that bleeding into this. And you can see how all three of these paths tend to converge into Donald Trump's presidency today. It's actually really crazy when you start tracing all these things back. You can see the connections between all this
Project
stuff.
2025.
With its stated goal being, quote, to assemble an army of aligned, vetted, trained, and prepared conservatives to go to work on day one to deconstruct the administrative state.
Everyone from the Koch brothers to billionaire activist Richard Mellon Scaife took his words to heart. The Chamber of Commerce quickly organized 2 Powell Memo
Just like
task
Yarvin
force
now.
conventions in 1973, the Levitt reports. One at the Polynesian Resort in Disney, one in Texas, and participants ranged from soon-to-be President Gerald Ford to the young, ambitious Roger Ailes. Now, Powell's main concern was reestablishing corporate interest in 4 arenas: politics and public opinion, the media, and college campuses. I want to talk about each of them and how they've created our modern nightmare, but let's start with college campuses. Now, in Powell's telling, the most dangerous enemy of the business elite, besides Nader, was personally attractive and magnetic leftist thinkers on college campuses who are leading millions of bright young men to hate their country and its freedoms. I feel really seen right now. You know, I don't know if I was a personally attractive professor.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say is that sounds real familiar, right? And this is where the power lies for the leftist movement, is in people like Adam Mockler and Luke Beasley and these other big channels that are doing the work that these young people were doing on college campuses at that time. And obviously also these kids that are still at college campuses as well.
Actually, on Rate My Professor, they'd have the chili pepper. And I often got the chili pepper. So thanks, students. But as one might expect from a partner at a law firm that wouldn't hire black people, a certain kind of revolutionary especially got Powell's goat. He specifies that in most of these groups, the movement against the system is participated in only by minorities. Yet, these often are the most articulate, the most vocal, the most prolific in their writing and speaking. I'm not going to say he's like less than a racist, but at least he's a complimentary racist, I guess. As part of its quest to regain power, Powell argued that corporate America should propagate pro-business sentiments in academia by, among other things, sending equally attractive, articulate, and well-informed speakers. Groups like the National Association of Scholars began to crop up, boldly promoting Western intellectual heritage, combating multicultural or feminist curricula, and funding the careers of aspiring conservative scholars. Financial speculators funded economics professors to downplay market risks before the 2008 financial collapse. By 2011, the Charles G. Koch Foundation went mask off and took over hiring at Florida State University via its $1.5 million grant. Today, the tech oligarchy has its hands all over academia. They pay for the research of the very people in a position to criticize them, says scholar Hani Farid. It's what the oil and gas industry has done with climate change, and it's what the tobacco companies did with cigarette research. Powell's memo also warned that school textbooks should be put under instant surveillance because they were being covertly rewritten by civil rights and union activists.
And that once again, this is cyclical, right? It's like, that's the same thing that also happened during the Red Scare. It was, we can't have, these certain authors having their books out there because even if they don't espouse communist ideas, they're written by communists, therefore they're bad. And this is now, like I've said, the Red Scare, and I call this the PED Scare, is the idea that, you can't have LGBT people involved in those because they're grooming the children and turning the children trans and all of that shit. So you're also having the same pushback against books like this in this era as well.
Rather than showing both sides of highly debatable topics like segregation. At the same time, Powell's call for corporate America to create its own culture of scholarship and activism was met practically overnight with a flood of right-wing think tanks like the Cato Institute and the Federalist Society. While designing their PR makeover, the corporate class heeded Powell's warning that no one business could campaign too prominently, lest it become a target of the left's wrath. Rather, they collectively pooled their resources behind faceless, pleasantly titled organizations like the Chamber of Commerce or the Free Enterprise Institute, which is exactly what they did to fend off Powell's nemesis.
And that's what that caught me off guard when I was first looking at all of this. Like, that's how well that type of subversive naming of organizations is. When I realized, I was like, oh, the Chamber of Commerce is not good. I was like, oh, they got me. They got me good with that one. I mean, even Citizens United, right? Citizens United? Like, what the fuck? Like, how? What do you mean, united? I ain't united in this bullshit. Like, it's pretty crazy how well they've built all of this shit. And it just goes to show that for those people out there that we complain about them being aggressively gullible or simple-minded, like for people that aren't aggressively gullible or simple-minded, it's still a chore to figure some of this shit out. So you can imagine how easy it is for these people to be like, yeah, I'll believe it. It's good, actually. Like, I like it a lot.
Ralph Nader. Fun fact, the first time I voted in a presidential election, I voted for Ralph Nader. Hit me in the comments and say, you ruined it. You voted for a third-party candidate, and that's why Bush was president. I was voting in California. It didn't matter, and I did it to impress a girl. Mere months after the memo gained popularity,
Politically illiterate.
Business Roundtable formed, quickly enlisting 113 Fortune 200 CEOs. They bankrolled what one congressman called the most intense lobbying I have ever seen to defeat Ralph Nader's 1977 plan to start a non-regulatory consumer protection agency to advocate for things like fair prices and better safety measures.
Wow, that sounds terrible. Good thing they stopped that.
In case you're not tuned into the news, Elon Musk and Doge is currently gutting the Consumer Protections Bureau. That's cool. And we saw this the day before we were filming this video when Musk had a really bizarre press conference in the Oval Office. There's an article about it here titled, Musk's Cheeky Son Steals Show as He Picks Nose and Squirms in Oval Office with Don. And now if you just read that headline, you might just skip over it, right? Because if the most headline-inspiring thing
ground news is cool.
was Elon's
Ground news
kid
is great,
picking boogers,
but I only have so much
probably
time
not
left.
anything, newsworthy going on.
Sorry,
With the
Wisecrack.
information you need to navigate
There you
this
go. Ground news.
increasingly weird
Ground
time.
dot news
Now, I think
slash
Ground News is
Wisecrack.
doing really important
Okay.
work. I hope you check them out. But for now, let's get back to the show. When it
Don't
came to the
get us
media,
when you're
Powell
vegan.
warned conservatives to monitor television just as doggedly as they did
Liar.
textbooks, and encouraged special interest groups to complain to the FCC when free enterprise was treated unfairly. He urged corporate America to similarly propagate its ideas across written media from popular
Ultimate Reduction, it says, thank you for voting for Ralph Nader. My family and friends and all proudly voted for Ralph Nader 4 times for POTUS. That's pretty dope. I heard that there's a really good documentary on Ralph Nader. I don't know enough about Ralph Nader, but I'm going to definitely try to find this documentary that this girl at my work was actually telling me about. So I'm going to check out more about Ralph Nader. I think that's next. Right now I'm working on this guy right here. I don't know if you guys can see this well. George C. Marshall. A big part of, obviously, the end of World War II and a part of World War II. That's the book I'm currently working on. And the other book I'm reading, the COVID book as well. I'm reading that one. And then I want to potentially, the next 2 people I think I'd like to look into is Nader. And I do know something about Winston Churchill, but I'd like to read a book about Winston Churchill as well.
magazines to scholarly journals. But back to Powell, who actually had one
do
fourth pillar
crazy
of
shit
his
for
plan
women.
so chilling that we had to save it for last. He predicted that with an activist-minded Supreme Court, the judiciary may be the most important instrument for social, economic, and political
This is
change.
how they
Corporations like
fucked
Philip
over the
Morris
Supreme
started
Court. Yep.
funding an explosion of legal foundations to sue the government for overreach against corporations' rights, including the National Chamber Litigation Center, which today has a 70% win rate in the Roberts Supreme Court. But as if to really prove his point, 3 months later, Powell eked out Nixon's nomination to the Supreme Court, where he would become the activist judge he had described in his memo, one with a fanatical belief in the interest of corporate America. Listen, I don't like him, but it's cool to have a dream and then achieve that dream. That's cool. Powell's ascension to the Supreme Court set the stage for today's oligarchy by giving a voice to that forgotten man, the lowly corporation. Little corporation, you need help getting up the stairs? By 1978, he was penning a decision in the First National Bank of Boston v. Bellotti case that took the monumental step of declaring corporations' right to free speech. And by free speech, I mean the right to just spend a ton of money on ballot initiatives across the country. The legalese is complicated and boring, but the point is that Powell set a huge precedent in this corporate right to free speech, which laid the groundwork for Citizens United to flood corporate money into politics in 2010, facilitating the rise of corporate influence over political policy. 8 years after Powell galvanized his conservative tribe, the country elected the most business-friendly president it had seen in decades. My guy, Ronald Reagan. Now, the Powell-inspired Heritage Foundation sent Reagan a list of 2,000 policy recommendations, 2/3 of which it claims Reagan attempted or achieved. Today, many scholars draw a straight line from Powell's memo to the rise of corporate power in America that has consolidated wealth into the hands of the extraordinarily rich. If you're extraordinarily rich, give us money. Powell would be pleasantly surprised that the once supposedly politically reluctant businessmen have aggressively entered politics, creating a revolving door between corporate America and Washington, D.C. that skews everything in the favor of wealthy business elites. Like how George Bush's chief of counsel on environmental quality was an American Petroleum Institute lobbyist who personally edited climate reports to stoke uncertainty about the science. He later took a gig at ExxonMobil. Good for him. During Obama's time in office, the revolving door between tech and government thrived, with over 250 individuals moving between Google.
This is actually something I wanted to talk about on a video, was how Obama's administration did indeed create the door opening to what is happening with Trump now. And I know that sounds insane, but it is the truth, because Obama embraced these big tech people super strongly, and that's why you actually saw so many of them in Biden's camp for the first bit, right? A lot of these tech oligarchs were actually attempting to find their way into Biden's government. Biden, crazy enough as it was, actually kind of stiff-armed them and kept them at arm's length away. And to this point, I mean, I'm both weirdly proud of him for doing it, but also at the same time very surprised, because the left was very much accepting of tech oligarchs within, Obama's administration. It was a revolving door of them, and really fucking surprised me that Biden kind of pushed them off. And obviously what they chose to do was they chose to find a much more malleable presidential candidate, and they found that very easily in Donald Trump, who obviously now is just literally going and golfing while Elon Musk burns down the country. And he golfs. Yeah. So
Google's empire and the federal government alone. Today, nearly 700 government officials, military officers, and members of Congress hold high-ranking positions at the top 20 defense companies, likely contributing to the intense price gouging on military contracts that constitutes half the Pentagon's budget. Since Powell's memo, the new oligarchy's influence over money and ideas has gutted welfare, crushed healthcare reform, and stymied action on climate change. Meanwhile, 741 billionaires, exemplified by the Musks and Zuckerbergs of the world, wield $5 trillion in wealth compared to the roughly $4 trillion owned by the bottom 50% of American households.
I've used that
This
chart.
wielding of wealth is seen in Elon Musk's contributions to the Trump campaign, which then enabled his shadow presidency. So what made Powell's blueprint so effective in creating a system in which the business interest of an elite group matters way more than the interest of the general population? To answer that, it's worth returning to a few lines of the Powell memo that may have made your ears perk up. Now, recall how Powell calls out the power of civil rights activists and radical minority activists. Now, this wasn't out of character. He once worried he wouldn't be confirmed to the Supreme Court because he'd publicly insulted Martin Luther King Jr. in numerous speeches, even dismissing King's letter from a Birmingham jail as simply a doctrine of anarchy that nobody intellectually honest could espouse. He also chastised black activists because at least they were better off in America than they would be in Uganda, and he warned another justice that full desegregation.
Dude, that's literally an argument that people make even today. Oh my God, we have not grown. We have not grown. Fan says you need to go back even further. Look in the original national parties, the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. That's where things first started to go wrong. Yeah, no. I was looking at, was it Franklin Pierce? I think it was during Franklin Pierce's time, a little bit about the Federalists. So I know what you're talking about. And isn't that that Leo, whatever his name is, that also funds all the Supreme Court justices runs to be on the Supreme Court? Also, he's a part of the Federalist Society, right? I'm pretty sure he is as well. Yeah, it's pretty trippy. It goes back to the beginning of America, pretty much. There's very little time spent after the creation of America as its own country. There's very little time until these people start setting down their roots and making these decisions as to what they want to do with the government. And that's why sometimes it's a little bit trippy to me to talk to people about like Curtis Yarvin and Peter Thiel and stuff, and have people say like, oh, well, that's just conspiracy theory because like, oh, are these people really trying to like go this crazy with the government? They're just trying to make money, bro. And it's like, no, this is a tale as old as time. People just like religious people, tech oligarchs, wealthy corporations, they all believe in creating some type of narrative for their own life while they're here that ends in some type of legacy. And they believe that the way to accomplish that legacy is by changing the very fundamental way that this country works to better fit what they want to do, right? And so when I talk about Curtis Yarvin, and many people kind of roll their eyes or go like, yeah, bro, whatever, that's kind of conspiracy-ish or whatever. It's like, this is not new. People have forever been trying to create a government that they think is the best. I mean, that's how we got this country. It's not conspiracy to think that. But people are obsessed with thinking about the monetary portion of it. And so they constantly think that, like, you know, a bunch of people trying to create a form of government that gives them authority, power, control, connections, status, all of those things, that seems far-fetched to them. But if you sell them on the idea that it's just all for money, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's across the board. I don't think that's just on the right. I think that the left as well tends to fall into this trap of thinking that everything is just about money. But these people have plenty of money. They're looking for other things. And some of that is legacy driven and some of that is control driven or authority driven. It's a little bit of a kink for them. You know what I'm saying?
Segregation would make our cities jungles. I hope that hearing that felt a tenth as gross as it felt to say it. Now, as Justice Powell wrote a majority decision claiming that the United States had become a nation of minorities and white people needed protection as a minority group. I think he might have been a bad guy. Powell's memo helped catalyze the kind of philanthropy that fully metastasized into the 1980s culture wars over things like humanities curriculums and political correctness, wars designed to trigger white animosity with the secondary aim of undermining working class solidarity. Now, this strategy is tried and true. It was used by the earliest oligarchs in America, colonial plantation owners who created a racial caste system to pit white European indentured servants against enslaved Africans. As historian Heather Cox Richardson notes, encouraging poor whites to identify with white landowners meant their lower-class white neighbors got the benefit of believing they were on the same level as rich men because they shared the same racial identity. They would not revolt because preserving the distinction between themselves and slaves was more important than seeking political power. Imagine simple that, people. You know? Imagine if the strong, rich, powerful white guys knew that the less powerful white guys would just do whatever they wanted because of racial animosity, and if they sort of fueled that racial animosity, racial, not Rachel, Rachel, we love you, that they could then just take power and do whatever they wanted with it. What if that happened? Gilded Age oligarchs and mass manufacturing created racial caste systems that made labor solidarity impossible, often using immigrants of color as strikebreakers, all while advocating for social Darwinism that treated white people as inherently superior. The political elite exploited sectional, racial, cultural, and religious cleavages to win office. Then they turned government over to the corporations. Or as magnate Jay Gould put it, I can hire one half of the working class to kill the other half.
Oh
Jay
my
Gould
God.
Also sounds like a bad guy. Despite America making some racial progress, this cleavage has been re-employed by the powerful conservative academic, media, and political machine to convince poor Americans that any government spending is bad because it amounts to handouts to marginalized groups. From Reagan's welfare queens.
She used 80 names, 30 addresses, 15 telephone numbers to collect food stamps, Social Security, veterans benefits for 4 non-existent deceased veterans' husbands.
Dog, first of all, I'm not even mad. I'm actually pretty fucking impressed. Like, come on. Like, you hear that story nowadays, you don't even get mad. You look at that shit and you're like, damn, that was that. How? That's like when you guys hear the story about like the guy that got paid but didn't show up to work for like 6 years. And you're like, not really mad. Big up to you, brother.
As well as welfare.
To today's war over DEI.
Are you saying this crash was somehow
here we go.
caused and the result of diversity hiring? And what evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been. We have a high standard. We've had a much higher standard than anybody else.
Which are parroted by Elon Musk and elevated on his social media platform. Oligarchs continue to foment racial grievances to distract people from their economic pain and encourage their business-friendly beliefs in small governments and even smaller taxes. When Powell envisioned a more politically empowered conservative business movement, he likely didn't picture a volatile near-trillionaire hacking into the Treasury Department. But the success of the agenda he laid out in his memo indisputably was a huge inflection point that helped get us here. Okay, guys, that's all for this one. Thank you so much for watching. Please do subscribe, ring the bell, and leave a comment if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.
This guy's dope. I know he's only part of this. I think there's more people that are part of Wisecrack, but he's dope. I really enjoy. I watched some other videos of his, and I really liked him too. He's got a good way of talking and stuff. What I was going to say is that, like, do you guys remember the time, I say this a lot, do you remember the time when we all agreed that billionaires are assholes? Do you remember a time when us lower middle class, upper middle class, impoverished people, all of us agreed that, like, the real issues in our society were due to corruption and billionaires and gigantic fucking conglomerates like BlackRock and Terminus and Vanguard? Remember when we all agreed on that? And then half of our country got mentally ill because of COVID, and now they support the billionaires and the corruption, and they're happy BlackRock bought the openings to the Panama Canal. Yeah, Pepperidge Farm remembers. Pepperidge Farm remembers. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell, and check out that video on the screen now.